Balls, blue balls in particular, lots of them. And they do millions upon millions of damage. It's indeed Crafty's blue balls. And in this one, we're covering his excellent blue balls. Lightning build for the Ranger. It's fast, it's simple, one of the absolute best builds in the game, and it's cheaper than dropping a sub to both of our channels. It's in fact created with accessibility in mind, so you won't have to spend hundreds of divines to do all of this. Alright, and where does all these balls come from then? Well shit, that's what we're covering in this build. And to start us right off, we have our main blue ball generator, the cast on critical strike persistent buff. This is what we'll be working on, that is, stacking crit chance, and in turn spawning blue balls as we get our critical strikes. Wherever we can find crit chance, we're getting it. We'll then socket in as many blue balls as our mana regeneration allows, and just spam out our lightning arrows to get the critical strikes. It's the only thing we need to do while mapping, in fact, and only while bossing, we start rubbing our scalp to activate those 3 brain cells of ours to deal additional damage. Because while bossing, we're of course spamming the lightning rod and dropping down the per usual orb of storms. And considering how many balls we're spawning as we're doing that, we get the pure insanity that we are currently witnessing. Alright, that's the most basic of the basics. To understand how the build actually works and what you need to get it up and running, let's start by taking a look at the gems. For starters, the cast on crit. What you need to know here is that you crit, stack the thing up, and all of the socketed balls are casted at once. And this thing is regarded as a projectile, so you can get additional 2 per cast from Scattershot, in combination with extra projectiles from your bow and Deadeye Ascendancy. That's pretty crazy if you ask me. Another reason to use cast on crit rather than shock is due to saving a shit ton of currency, as we'll get huge value from Widow Hail, boosting our crit chance via quiver bonuses, saving you hundreds of divines for basically the same damage. Next up, we have Lightning Rod. We're only using this on bosses, and while you're a weak-ass bitch trying to gear up, we then boost it via concentrated effect, lightning infusion, close combat, which by the way means you want to fight close when nuking bosses, lightning exposure for the penetration, and overcharge. All of these are simply there to grant you additional damage and extra shock. We then have our main spamming ability, Lightning Arrow. To get it to actually hit enemies, we're making it fork and then combining it with Ricochet. Primal Ornament and Martial Tempo are then used simply for additional damage. For the next skill, we have Orb of Storms. As previously stated, we're dropping this thing onto the bosses before we nuke the living shit out of them, simply to trigger more chains via Lightning Rod. We'll also use it to regain mana as we're doing it, because it's otherwise pretty much impossible to keep mana up during the boss killing due to how many balls we are spawning. We also have additional shock here and chain to allow it to deal additional damage. Now, despite us rocking cast on crit rather than shock, we do indeed need to shock every enemy. Not only does it keep up the 20% damage bonus, but it also allows for Herald of Thunder to explode upon our enemies as they die. A must-have for mapping, that's for sure. On top of that, we're going to rock a bunch of energy shield in this build, and by using Shock Siphon here, we can keep us well and healthy as long as we're killing enemies. We then have Magnified Effect as to get a screen-wide nuke, Innovate to buff all of our lightning damage, and Elemental Focus for the additional damage. We also have Ghost Dance here for the energy shield, which grants us the shield back as we're getting hit. Granted, we have a bunch of evasion rating, which we will have. And to gain additional mana, this is also where we are socketing Clarity. Next up is Conductivity. This thing is used mainly for bossing, allowing us to put a massive lightning resistance curse onto our enemies. You can use it on rough elites, but the goal with this build is to only spam lightning arrows while mapping and all of the other skills are simply there to either buff it or used on bosses. To buff this skill, we have Heightened Curse, Cursed Ground, and Hex Bloom to keep up the curse easier, especially if the boss has adds. And finally, Wind Dancer, which is for the evasion, and you know it baby, and Voltaic Mark to nuke bosses with increased chance to shock. This should allow you to nuke the boss down before it runs out. And that, my friends, are the gems. What do you say we check out the gear now, shall we? Damn right we shall. As we talked about earlier, we're rocking the Widowhail Crude Bow. This thing is cheap as shit and works great, allowing you to swipe your credit card on other things. Hot dogs, for example, you fat fuck. What you do want, however, is a great quiver, and it's important that the greatness lies in lightning and physical damage bonuses, because without this, you'll deal 0 damage as you have none on the bow. You'll then prioritize projectile speed, skills along with attack speed in either Dex or Int. And why Dex or Int? Well, shit, because ideally you'll run Hand of Wisdom and Action. Intelligence is the goat here, but thing is, you still need a bunch of Dex to upgrade your gems. So you'll have to go for a mix of them both regardless if you have the gloves or not. Next up are the armor pieces. Here you have a few things you want to worry about. For starters, you have to get your resistances sorted and stack as much max life as possible. When you've done that, you want to prioritize item rarity, evasion, and energy shield in combination with raw int and dex stats. All of these stats are highly valuable, and I'd focus on the defensives before anything else in case you want to stay alive in this game. Because dying in this game makes me want to die in real life, preferably from getting my balls stuck in my jeans zipper and bleeding to death, because that's how I feel each time I die and lose a map and my loot. In any way, defensives and int and dex. You'll then want to make sure you got your spirit sorted, which is yet another one of your highest priorities as cast on crit requires a bunch of spirit. If you're lacking spirit, then you'll have to ditch Wind Dancer or Ghost Dance. You'll sort this by grabbing spirit on both amulet and chest, and then stack some of that lovely damage as well. As ring, we have the Thief Torment Emerald Ring for a bunch of item rarity in combination with life and mana regen, accuracy, and flat resistances. And for the love of God, don't sleep on movement speed. You do have the additional movement speed simply by being a ranger, but get a 30% roll here and you'll be fast as fuck boy. Alright friends, that's the gear. In short, get your defensives and spirits sorted, a great quiver, and try to obtain the uniques, and you'll be ready to blast down all content in the game, no problemo. Next on the agenda, we have a massive passive tree to get through, so let's jump right in. And to start us right off, we have the Ascendancy. Pink Eye is the name of the game, where Tailwind grants us defensives and movement speed per rank, in combination with 30% damage reduction. An absolutely incredible passive. We then go for Point Blank for the instant damage and Endless Munitions for an additional projectile. Alright, and then onto the passives we go. We first go via the attack speed nodes, all the damage and int nodes along the way, or dex if you so will, until we end up at our first lovely cluster. Here we find yet additional quiver bonuses for a hefty damage bonus. After that, it's time to head down to Narnia, make a 45-degree turn, and go for Split Shot. We'll be utilizing forking in this build, so be grabbing this node right here. We're able to fart out some additional lightning arrows. Other than that, we have Falcon Technique for attack speed per dex and Bestial Skin down here, which greatly boosts our evasion. On the Family Jewels, you want to smack on some quiver bonuses, attack speed and damage. I'll have these stats in the planner so you can find them. In any way, we go downwards here to pick up the Herald damage bonuses, and more importantly, the crit chance here. Because crit chance good. Crit chance spawn many balls. We also finish this part off by grabbing the feathered fletching to boost our damage further via projectile speed. After that, we head on back again, grabbing damage and additional shock along the way until we find ourselves at Eternal Youth. You'll use this as long as you're stacking Energy Shield, as you can then use your flasks to restore the Energy Shield. After that, we're grabbing some additional crit, attack speed, and evasion just so that we can find ourselves at this node right here, Branching Bolts. This thing allows us to chain yet one additional time, granting us 100% extra chance to chain for a huge damage bonus. Lovely, huh? Damn right. And with that, we have successfully completed the planner. Great job, friends! Let's check out how to get good now, and you're free to fuck off after that. In case you already forgot, I previously said that mapping is easy peasy. That's the goal at least, because with the proper gear, you shouldn't need anything other than your lightning arrow when mapping. And if you're not quite there yet, then you have your lightning rod. Simply dump it onto your enemies and start blasting lightning arrows through it, and you should be able to clear everything using one or a maximum of 2 buttons. For bossing, however, you do need to activate a few of those brain cells of yours, mainly to instantly kill the boss and not having to do any mechanics, because who the hell has time for that? So this is what you do. You have your conductivity and volatic mark. You'll throw them onto the boss as he spawns. You then want to drop an orb of storms. After that, you're basically done, because all you do now is spam lightning arrows onto the boss. This should allow you to kill it before it can move, and if not, you'll repeat the combo. You may run out of mana here, in which case you pop a mana potion and keep going. But you do want to get to a point where you can nuke the boss down without running out of mana, which you should if you're using the gems we discussed earlier. With that, my friends, I'm leaving you for now. Check out Crafty, he's streaming, and he's a beautiful young man. And drop a sub for the love of God.